Aurora Station floated in the endless dark of space like a jewel. It was a place where humans and aliens came together, trading knowledge, sharing culture, and signing agreements that shaped the future of the galaxy. For Daniel Cross, a young, human officer freshly assigned to the diplomatic corps, it was both a chance and a challenge. He had grown up on Earth reading about alien worlds, and now he stood in the heart of it all. Daniel had always been calm, reliable, and good at following orders. He was not a hero, not a man of great fame, just someone trying to do his duty. That morning, as he straightened his uniform and clipped on the simple badge with his name, he felt a mix of pride and nervousness. Daniel Cross, Liaison Officer, Earth Federation was printed clearly on it. He had polished the small metal tag until it shone. It felt ordinary to him, yet somehow it would become the key to everything. The Grand Hall of Aurora Station was prepared for a special reception. Banners of different species hung from the tall, curved ceiling. The air shimmered with soft lights, and the sound of alien voices filled the space. Clicks, hums, and words that translators worked hard to smooth into understandable speech. Diplomats moved like dancers in a careful pattern, greeting one another with bows, gestures, or smiles. Daniel stood near the human delegation, trying not to look out of place. He was there to assist, to introduce himself politely, and to make sure everything ran smoothly. He expected routine work. Smiles, handshakes, perhaps a few cultural misunderstandings. Nothing unusual. But fate had other plans. Across the hall, the Elorian envoys entered. They were tall, graceful beings with pale, luminous skin that seemed to glow faintly in the soft lights. Their eyes were like polished gems, reflecting more colors than human eyes could see. Their garments shimmered like woven starlight. Among them walked Lady Ceres, the daughter of one of the Elorian counselors. She moved with elegance, but her face showed a trace of tiredness, as if she carried some hidden weight. Daniel noticed her only in passing at first. She seemed like the others, beautiful in an alien way, mysterious yet polite. He returned his attention to the line of introductions. Each human officer stepped forward, gave their name, and exchanged respectful greetings. When it came to his turn, he walked forward confidently. He bowed slightly just as he had been taught and spoke clearly. Daniel Cross, Liaison Officer of the Earth Federation. It is an honor to meet you. He expected a nod, perhaps a formal phrase in return. Instead, something strange happened. Lady Ceres's eyes fell on his name tag. For a second, she seemed frozen, as if her whole body had turned to stone. Her glowing eyes widened. Her lips trembled. The hall grew quiet as she failed to answer. Then, without warning, she let out a piercing scream that echoed across the chamber. "That's him!" she cried, pointing at Daniel with shaking hands. "That's him. The man from my nightmares and my wedding." The hall erupted in confusion. Diplomats gasped, guards rushed forward, and translators stuttered as they tried to make sense of her words. Daniel stood in shock, his heart pounding. He had never seen her before in his life. Why was she screaming at him like that? I don't understand," Daniel stammered. His voice shook despite his effort to remain calm. "I don't know her. We have never met." But Lady Ceres did not stop. Tears filled her eyes as she shouted again, her voice breaking between fear and certainty. "It was always you, the man in the shadows, the man in my dreams, the destroyer, and the husband." The human delegation stared at Daniel, their faces pale with alarm. The Elorian envoys rushed to Ceres's side, trying to calm her, but she clutched her head as though the memories were too strong to bear. Daniel felt every eye in the hall upon him. He wanted to vanish, to melt into the floor, but he stood rooted, in place. His badge glinted under the lights, the name Daniel Cross shining as if mocking the silence after her scream. Guards from both species stepped forward, surrounding him. Elorian soldiers aimed their slender weapons, and even the human security detail moved uneasily. For the first time in his service, Daniel felt like a criminal despite doing nothing wrong. "Wait," Daniel raised his hands in surrender. "I don't know what she's talking about. I have never seen her before." But Ceres shook her head violently, her voice dropping to a whisper as she repeated the words, almost chanting them. "The man from my nightmares, and my wedding, The same face, the same name, Daniel Cross. Her body went limp. She fainted into the arms of her attendants. The hall buzzed with fearful whispers. Was this a vision, a warning, or madness? Daniel's superior officer, Ambassador
Reyes, stepped forward quickly. "This is a misunderstanding," Reyes said firmly. "Our officer is not responsible for whatever visions Lady Saris has suffered. We will cooperate fully to clear this matter. But the Aelorian counselor, Saris's..."
Father narrowed his eyes. His voice was cold as he spoke. Dreams are not madness in our culture. They are warnings, threads of truth. If she has seen him, then there is a reason, and we will discover it. Daniel swallowed hard. His hands were still raised, his mind spinning with disbelief. Why me? Why my name? Why my face? The reception was cut short. Guards escorted Daniel out of the hall, whispers following him like shadows. He felt the weight of suspicion pressing down on him. His chest tightened with the fear that his life had just changed forever. As he walked through the long corridors of Aurora Station, his thoughts ran wild. He tried to recall if he had ever met an Aelorian before. No, he was certain he hadn't. He grew up on Earth, studied at the academy, and this was his first assignment outside the solar system. He had never even seen Lady Saris until today. Yet her scream had not been the sound of a stranger mistaking someone. It had been the sound of recognition. Deep, painful recognition. She had known his name, his face, his role in something he himself did not understand. When they reached the human quarters, Ambassador Reyes stopped him. "Daniel, you need to stay calm. This situation is dangerous. The Aelorians are not a people who ignore visions. They believe in them. For Saris to speak like this, it will cause a storm." "But sir," Daniel said desperately, "I swear, I don't know her. I've never seen her in my life." Reyes looked at him closely, searching for any sign of a lie. At last he sighed. "I believe you. But belief will not protect you. We must be careful." That night Daniel lay in his quarters, staring at the ceiling. Sleep would not come. The echo of her scream haunted him. The man from my nightmares, and my wedding. Why would she say such words? What kind of visions did she see? And why did they point at him, a simple liaison officer, when he had no power, no importance? He touched his name tag, still lying on the desk beside his bed. It seemed so ordinary, a small piece of metal with his name. Yet it had changed everything. As he finally drifted into restless sleep, he dreamed. In the dream, he stood under a strange sky filled with 2 moons. Lady Saris was there, dressed in silver, her eyes full of both sorrow and hope. She held out her hand to him. "Daniel Cross," she whispered in the dream. "It was always you." He woke with a start, sweat on his forehead. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps she was not entirely wrong. The next morning on Aurora Station, the halls felt different. Where yesterday there had been music, conversation, and friendly greetings, now there was silence and suspicion. Word of the outburst had spread like fire. Everywhere Daniel walked, eyes followed him, curious, cautious, or even hostile. He was no longer just a young human officer. He was the man Lady Saris had screamed about. Daniel tried to keep his head high as he moved through the corridors, but his stomach twisted with unease. Guards shadowed him discreetly, though he noticed the way their hands never strayed far from their weapons. He was not under arrest, but he was not free either. At noon, he was summoned to the Aelorian council chamber. The room was vast, filled with pillars that seemed to glow from within. Aelorian symbols shimmered across the floor, forming patterns that seemed to shift when looked at too long. It felt less like a council room and more like a temple. At the center sat the counselors, tall and elegant in their robes. Among them was Counselor Thalos, the father of Lady Saris. His eyes were hard as crystal as he studied Daniel. At his side stood Saris herself, pale and weak from the previous night's fainting, yet her gaze never left Daniel's face. Ambassador Reyes and a few human officers were allowed to attend, but their presence was small compared to the weight of the Aelorian stairs. Daniel stood in the circle before them, feeling as though the entire galaxy pressed down on his shoulders. Counselor Thalos spoke first. His voice was deep, commanding, but calm. Human Officer Daniel Cross, you stand before us because my daughter, Lady Ceres, recognized you as the man from her visions. Do you deny this recognition? Daniel cleared his throat. With respect, Counselor, I do. I have never met Lady Ceres before yesterday. I did not even know her name until she spoke. Murmurs rose among the council, but Thalos raised his hand, silencing them. Then he turned to Ceres. Daughter, speak. Tell us what you saw. Ceres stepped forward slowly. She looked fragile, as if a single word might break her. But her voice carried clearly through the chamber. Since childhood I have been plagued with dreams, visions. At first they came rarely. But as I grew, they became stronger, clearer. Always the same face, always the same man, and always two paths, one of fire and destruction, the other of unity and peace. Her eyes locked on Daniel, and he felt a shiver run through him. It was him, she continued. The same eyes, the same voice, the same name, Daniel Cross. In my visions, he was both my enemy and my partner. I saw him standing over ruins, and I saw him standing beside me at a wedding beneath alien stars. Both futures were clear. Both futures were possible. But the man was always the same. The chamber was silent. Even the faint hum of the station's system seemed to fade as everyone absorbed her words. Daniel's mouth went dry. He wanted to speak, to protest, but part of him was frozen, because as she spoke, fragments of memory stirred within him, memories that were not his own. He remembered flashes from his restless dream, the two moons in the sky, Ceres's hand reaching for his, her whisper in the night. It was always you. He shook the thought away. No. That was just a dream. Nothing more. Ambassador. Reyes stepped forward. With respect, Counselor Thalos, visions are not proof. Humans do not experience such things. My officer is not guilty of anything but sharing a name in a dream. But Ceres's eyes flashed. No. He is not just a name. He is the same soul. I would know him anywhere. Counselor Thalos leaned forward. If these visions are true, then this human is bound to our future. Perhaps he will bring salvation or perhaps ruin. We must learn which. Daniel finally found his voice. I don't understand. I'm just an officer. I was raised on Earth. I've never been to your world. I've never seen you before yesterday. How could I be part of your visions? Ceres tilted her head slightly as if pitying him. Because destiny does not ask for your permission, Daniel Cross. It simply comes. The word struck him like a blade. He wanted to shout that it was unfair, that his life was his own. But instead, he stood in silence, knowing any outburst would only make things worse. The council debated for hours. Some argued that Daniel was a threat and should be removed from the station. Others believed he was a chance for alliance, a link between humans and Aelorians. Through it all, Daniel sat quietly, his mind swirling with confusion. When the session ended, a decision was made. Daniel would not be expelled or punished, but neither would he be free. He was to stay under close observation, cooperating with both human scientists and Aelorian seers. Together, they would study the link between him and Ceres. As they left the chamber, Daniel felt drained. Ambassador Reyes placed a hand on his shoulder. Stay calm, Daniel, we'll get through this. But Daniel wasn't sure. Because in his heart, doubt had already taken root. That night, in the human quarters, Daniel sat with Dr. Alara, a human scientist specializing in alien psychology. She was sharp, curious, and not easily intimidated. Dream binding, she explained, pacing the room. The Aelorians believe certain individuals can see threads of possible futures, not just random dreams, but glimpses of what could be. Most species dismiss it as superstition, but we've recorded cases that are hard to explain. Daniel frowned. You're saying she really saw me in her dreams? Ilara shrugged. I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe she saw someone in her mind, gave it your face when she saw you. But she hesitated. What troubles me is her detail. She knew your name. She described things about you that are not public record. Daniel leaned forward. Like what? She mentioned your childhood scar on your left hand. She even knew the song your mother used to sing when you were small. How could she know that? Daniel felt his heart skip. He stared at his hand, tracing the faint scar from an old fall. And the song. Only his family knew that. He had never told anyone. I don't understand, he whispered. It's impossible. Or, Elara said softly, it means her visions are real. Daniel couldn't sleep. He turned over again and again in his bed, but the images would not leave him. The wedding under alien stars, the battlefield, Saris's scream. Finally, near dawn, he gave up and walked the quiet corridors of the station. Few were awake, and the hum of the life support systems was his only company. He ended up near one of the observation domes, staring out at the endless stars. He thought of Saris. He didn't want to, but he couldn't help it. Her face haunted him. Not just her fear, but the strange certainty in her eyes when she said, "It was always you." A soft voice behind him broke his thoughts. You cannot sleep either. Daniel turned. Saris stood there, cloaked. Her glow dimmed, in the shadow. For a moment he thought of calling the guards, but something in her expression stopped him. She looked less like an accuser and more like someone lost. I don't understand any of this, Daniel said quietly. Why me? Why my name? My face? I'm no one important. Saris stepped closer, her eyes reflecting the starlight. I wish I knew, but the visions have followed me all my life. I see two paths, one where you bring fire, and one where you bring peace, and both terrify me. Daniel swallowed. Maybe visions are wrong. Maybe, Saris agreed, though her voice lacked conviction. But I feel them. They are part of me. And now, part of you. For a long moment they stood in silence, staring at the stars. Neither enemy nor friend, just two people caught in something greater than themselves. And though Daniel tried to push the thought away, deep inside he wondered if perhaps fate had chosen him after all. Aurora Station had never felt so heavy. Days passed, yet the atmosphere did not lighten. Everywhere Daniel crosswalked, whispers followed him. Human officers tried to act normal, but their nervous glances gave them away. Alorian envoys avoided him as if even standing near him might bring disaster. Only Saris looked at him directly, and even her gaze was filled with a mix of fear and recognition. Daniel tried to bury himself in routine, but the visions would not let him. At first, they came only at night, creeping into his dreams. He would wake to the image of twin moons shining over alien ruins, the echo of voices calling his name. Sometimes he saw Saris in a wedding gown, her hand reaching for him. Other times, he saw her lying lifeless, the world burning around her. But soon, the visions began to appear while he was awake. One afternoon, as he walked down the corridor with Dr. Ilara, the scientist who had been assigned to observe him, the lights above him flickered. For a moment, the white walls dissolved, replaced by the vision of a battlefield. He stood ankle-deep in ash, alien ships burning in the sky, human soldiers shouting orders around him. The sound of explosions filled his ears. He stumbled, clutching the wall. Daniel? Ilara's voice snapped him back. The corridor returned. The light steadied. She looked at him with concern. Another one? He nodded, breathing hard. It felt real. Too real. Ilara frowned, tapping her data pad. They're growing, stronger. Whatever is happening, it's no ordinary dream. Daniel pressed his palms to his face. Why me? Why is this happening to me? There was no answer. The council ordered sessions where both Saris and Daniel would be studied together. Human scientists and Alorian seers worked side by side, their instruments glowing, their chants humming. Daniel was seated across from Saris in a chamber filled with soft lights. Close your eyes, instructed one of the Alorian seers, an elder named Vera. Her voice was calm and steady. Let the visions flow. Do not resist. Daniel hesitated. What if I don't want them? Vera's eyes glowed faintly as she studied him. You already carry them. Resistance only sharpens their edges. Acceptance may guide you. Reluctantly, Daniel closed his eyes. At once, the world around him shifted. He stood on a balcony overlooking a city of towers that glowed with silver light. Beside him stood Ceres, dressed in ceremonial robes. The crowd below cheered, banners of both human and Aelorian symbols waving together. Peace. Celebration. But then, the vision twisted. The cheering turned to screams. The towers collapsed in flames. Ceres reached for him, blood on her hands. Daniel, she whispered, her voice breaking. Why did you choose this path? He gasped and opened his eyes. Sweat ran down his face. His chest tightened as though he had run a great distance. Across from him, Ceres was pale, trembling. I saw it too, she whispered. Both futures, unity and ruin. The seer nodded slowly. The bond between you is undeniable. You do not merely share visions, you share fate. Daniel stood abruptly. No, I don't believe in fate. My life is mine. I will not be chained by dreams. Ceres looked at him sadly. You can deny the visions, Daniel, but they will not deny you. The human delegation grew restless. Ambassador Reyes argued often with the council, demanding that Daniel be treated fairly. He is not a prisoner, Reyes insisted. He has done nothing wrong. You cannot condemn a man for what might happen. But the Aelorians were firm. Councillor Thalos, Ceres' father, spoke for many. The visions are warnings. To ignore them is to walk blindly into disaster. Tensions grew on the station. Rumors spread that Daniel was a harbinger of war. Some Aelorians whispered that humans had sent him on purpose to infiltrate and destroy. Some humans muttered that the Aelorians were manipulating the visions to control the negotiations. Daniel felt the pressure mounting like a storm. He could not escape it. One evening, Ceres came to him in secret. They met in the quiet of the observation dome, where the stars stretched endless and silent beyond the glass. Why are you here? Daniel asked tiredly. Aren't you afraid of being seen with me? Her eyes softened. I am already tied to you in their eyes. What more can they say? He sighed. Do you really believe this? That we're bound by fate? Ceres hesitated, then nodded. I believe the visions are true, but I do not know which path is the real one. That is what terrifies me. Daniel turned to the stars. In my visions, I see myself leading soldiers. I see destruction. But I've never commanded anyone in my life. I'm not a warrior. I'm not even important. Ceres studied him quietly. Perhaps that is why the visions chose you, because humanity itself is unpredictable. You are not bound by tradition or prophecy the way others are. You are wild cards. Daniel frowned. Wild cards? Yes. My people calculate futures carefully. Most species do. But humans break patterns. You take risks. You make choices that even seers cannot predict. That is why you frighten some and fascinate others. Daniel shook his head. So I'm dangerous because I might choose wrong? Or powerful, Ceres said softly, because you might choose right. The next day, Daniel's visions struck again, this time during a council session. As debates grew heated, Daniel suddenly felt the air thicken. The chamber blurred, and he saw fire erupting across the station. Alarms blared. Smoke filled the halls. Aelorians and humans fought side by side against an unseen enemy. And in the center of it all, Daniel saw himself holding Ceres' hand, pulling her to safety. He snapped back to reality, gasping. The counselor stared at him. What did you see? Demanded Thalos. Daniel hesitated. He knew every word he spoke would carry weight. I saw war, but not between us. Something else. An attack. And I was there, with Ceres. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Some saw it as a warning of enemies waiting to strike. Others saw it as proof that Daniel and Ceres were bound by destiny. For Daniel, it was only more confusion. Each vision left him more uncertain of what was real and what was just a shadow of possibility. Later, alone in his quarters, Daniel sat at his desk, staring at his name tag. That simple badge had started everything. He turned it over in his hand, the letters of his name shining faintly. He whispered to himself, "Am I really just Daniel Cross? Or am I something else to them?" The door chimed. It was Alara. She stepped, inside, her face serious. "I've been analyzing the data from your sessions. Daniel, your brain patterns are unlike anything I've seen. It's as if you're tapping into multiple timelines at once." Daniel blinked. "What does that even mean?" "It means," she said slowly, "that maybe both futures are real, and your choices decide which one becomes true." The thought struck him like lightning. His choices, not Saris's visions, not the Council's fears. His. For the first time since the nightmare began, Daniel felt a spark of determination. Maybe he couldn't escape the visions. But maybe, just maybe, he could change them. That night, the visions returned stronger than ever. He stood again under the twin moons. Before him stretched two paths. On one, flames devoured cities, ships exploded in orbit, and Saris lay dying in his arms. On the other, he stood beside her in peace, surrounded by humans and Elorians celebrating together, the stars bright above them. He turned and saw a figure in the shadows. It was himself, older, hardened, scarred. The older Daniel looked at him with tired eyes and said, "Your choices decide everything. Do not let fear guide you." Daniel woke with a start, heart racing. The words echoed in his mind. Your choices decide everything. And for the first time, he believed it. Aurora Station was no longer the shining beacon of peace it had been. Its halls buzzed with quiet tension, and its great chambers echoed with arguments that never seemed to end. Where once diplomats shared meals and laughter, now they traded accusations. Daniel Cross found himself at the center of it all, though he had never asked for such a role. He could feel the pressure wherever he went, eyes watching, whispers following, guards shadowing his every step. He was no longer simply an officer, he was a symbol. To some Elorians, he was a dangerous omen. To some humans, he was a tool to be used. And to himself, he was just a man caught between nightmares and choices. The visions continued, growing sharper each day. Sometimes he saw unity, sometimes war, but always Saris stood at the heart of it. And always the choices seemed to circle back to him. Rising tensions, the council chamber had become a battlefield of words. One morning, Ambassador Reyes argued fiercely with Councillor Thalos. "You cannot demand his execution," Reyes said, his voice firm. "He has committed no crime." Thalos's voice thundered in reply. "You call it no crime? He is the figure in my daughter's visions, the same visions that have guided our people for centuries. If he brings ruin, the blood will be on all of us." Another councillor leaned forward. "Or perhaps he brings unity. Perhaps we are meant to accept him." The arguments went in circles, but Daniel only felt the weight of every word pressing against him. He was not in control of his own story anymore. Others were writing it for him line by line. Shadows of extremism, whispers of rebellion soon spread across the station. Not everyone wanted peace. Some humans believed the Aelorians wanted to enslave them. Some Aelorians feared humans as unpredictable, wild cards destined to bring chaos. One evening, Dr. Alara approached Daniel with a grim face. "We intercepted messages," she said. "There are extremist groups on both sides who want you dead. Some believe killing you will prevent the visions from coming true. Others believe killing you will spark the war they secretly desire." Daniel's blood ran cold. "So whichever way I turn, someone wants me gone?" Ilara nodded. "That's the danger of being a symbol. You're no longer seen as a man, Daniel. You're a prophecy walking. The assassination attempt happened sooner than anyone expected." Daniel was walking with Saris down one of the quieter corridors of the station. She had requested to speak with him privately, away from the endless noise of politics. For once the hall was peaceful, only the hum of the station systems filling the air. I cannot escape it, Saris admitted, her voice soft. Every time I close my eyes, I see the paths. I see you standing beside me. Sometimes as my partner, sometimes as my destroyer. Do you not fear it as I do? Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Of course I fear it. But fear doesn't decide the future, choices do. She studied him quietly. Then what choice will you make? Before he could answer, a sharp sound cut through the corridor. Metal scraping, a faint hiss. Daniel turned, just in time to see a figure step from the shadows, a weapon in hand. Get down, Daniel shouted. The blast of energy seared the air where Saris had been standing. Daniel grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a support pillar. Alarm screamed through the corridor as more attackers appeared. 3 of them, cloaked and fast. Security forces were nowhere in sight. It was just Daniel and Saris. Stay low, Daniel barked, his instincts taking over. Another blast struck, the pillar, shaking the ground beneath them. Daniel peeked out, his heart racing. These weren't simple criminals. They moved with precision. Assassins. Saris's breathing was quick, but her voice was steady. You cannot fight them all. Watch me, Daniel muttered. Flight through the station. The assassins advanced quickly, firing at every cover. Daniel knew they couldn't stay pinned down. He grabbed Saris's hand and pulled her into a side passage. They ran. The station's narrow corridors blurred past them as energy blasts echoed behind. Daniel's lungs burned, but adrenaline drove him forward. This way, Saris pointed. She seemed to know the station better, guiding him through twists and turns, but their pursuers were fast, never far behind. At one junction, Daniel ducked into a maintenance shaft. In here! He pulled Saris inside just as a blast scorched the wall where they had stood. The shaft was cramped, the metal walls vibrating. As they crawled, Saris's hand trembled in his, but her voice remained firm. They will not stop. Whoever sent them will send more. Daniel clenched his jaw. Then we don't let them find us. They crawled until the shaft opened into another corridor. By some luck or fate, they stumbled into an abandoned storage bay. Daniel slammed the door shut and locked it, chest heaving. For a moment, silence. Then Saris spoke softly. You saved me? Daniel looked at her, surprised. What else was I supposed to do? Leave you behind? Her eyes shimmered, reflecting the faint light. In some visions you do. Daniel's breath caught. Then I guess those aren't the paths I'll choose. Bond in the shadows, they sat together in the dark storage bay, listening for any sign of pursuit. The weight of danger pressed close. But for the first time, they were alone without the eyes of guards, scientists, or counselors. Do you believe in destiny, Daniel? Saris asked quietly. He thought about it for a long time. I don't know, but I believe in choices. Maybe the visions are warnings, not commands. Maybe they show what could happen, not what must happen. Saris tilted her head. Then what do you choose now? Daniel met her eyes. To protect you, whatever it takes. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, though sadness lingered in her gaze. Perhaps that is why the visions show us together. Not because it is fate, but because you choose it. For the first time, Daniel felt the heavy knot of fear inside him loosen slightly. Maybe she was right. Maybe it wasn't about destiny, binding him, but about the courage to decide his own path. Returned to light, eventually security forces found them. The assassins had fled, leaving chaos in their wake. Both human and Aelorian guards swarmed the storage bay, their weapons drawn, their eyes wide at the sight of Daniel and Saris together. Counselor Thalos rushed to his daughter, relief and anger warring in his face. Saris, are you hurt? I am safe, she said calmly, stepping forward. But her gaze lingered on Daniel. The attack shook the station. Some argued it proved Daniel was too dangerous to keep alive. Others claimed it proved he and Saris were bound since he had saved her. Rumors spread faster than fire. Some whispered of an alliance through marriage. Others of war if things continued. Daniel only knew one thing. He and Saris were now bound by more than visions. They had survived together, fought together, chosen together. The crossroads that night, as Daniel sat alone in his quarters, he thought of everything that had happened. The visions, the council, the assassins, the promise he had made to Saris. The words echoed in his mind. The man from my nightmares, and my wedding. He realized something then. Maybe the visions were not traps. Maybe they were signposts, warnings, on the road ahead. The nightmare and the wedding were not chains around his neck. They were possibilities waiting for his choice. And tomorrow, he would have to choose. Aurora Station trembled with unrest. Its shining corridors, once filled with hope, now carried the tension of a storm about to break. Whispers of war spread like fire, and every group blamed another for the chaos. On one side, extremist humans called for a preemptive strike against the Aelorians, convinced the ancient race would never accept equality. On the other side, Aelorian purists demanded Daniel's exile or his death before the visions could unfold. Everywhere Daniel walked, eyes followed. Some filled with hatred, some with fear, others with desperate hope. He was no longer just a man in uniform. He was a question waiting for an answer, and time for that answer was running out. The last council, the council chamber, had never felt so divided. Human and Aelorian representatives filled the hall, their voices raised in furious debate. Guards lined the walls, ready for violence if words failed. Ambassador Reyes stood, his face hard. We cannot keep running from the prophecy. We cannot let fear decide our future. Humanity is here to build peace, not destroy it. Counselor Thalos slammed his hand on the table. Peace? You call this peace? My daughter dreams of fire and ruin, and always this human stands at the center of it. If we let him live, if we let him near her, we risk everything. The chamber roared with agreement and protest. Then Saris rose. Her silver eyes swept across the council, silencing voices as if touched by unseen power. I have seen the visions, she said calmly. Yes, they show destruction. Yes, they show union. But visions are not chains. They are warnings. They show what may come if we do not choose wisely. Her gaze fell on Daniel. And the one who must choose stands here. The chamber grew still. All eyes turned to Daniel Cross. He stood slowly, his heart pounding but his voice steady. I never asked for this. I never wanted to be a prophecy. But I'm not running anymore. If I am the man in the visions, then let me be the man who proves them wrong. A murmur swept through the chamber. Daniel raised his voice. Nightmares don't have to come true. Wars don't have to begin. We, humans and Aelorians, can choose another path. The threat of war even. As his words settled, alarms blared through the chamber. A trembling voice cut in through the comms. Extremist. Fleets approaching. Human ships and Aelorian warbands both breaking treaty lines. They mean to attack. Panic spread. Council members shouted, guards rushed, and the chamber dissolved into chaos. Daniel's blood ran cold. He had seen this before, in his visions. The nightmare of fire consuming Aurora Station. Saris's voice broke through the noise. This is the choice. This is the moment the visions warned us of. Daniel clenched his fists. He could not fight fleets. He could not stop war with weapons. But maybe, just maybe, he could stop it with something greater. The bold idea Ambassador Reyes gripped Daniel's arm. If those fleets fire, it's over. Nothing will stop the war. Daniel's mind raced. He remembered Saris's words. The visions show what may come, not what must. He turned to her. The wedding. It was never about marriage, was it? It was about a symbol. A union strong enough to stop war. Saris's eyes widened. If we stood together, if we pledged unity before all, Daniel nodded, then maybe the nightmare won't matter. They'll see a new vision, a new path. Thalos's voice thundered. Impossible. You would bind yourself to my daughter, a human and an Aelorian? Such a bond has never been done. Saris stepped forward, her voice unwavering. Then let it be done now, not as fate, but as choice. The wedding of peace, the council chamber transformed into a hall of decision. The fleets outside drew closer, their weapons charged. The entire station tuned into the emergency broadcast as word spread. The human and the Aelorian seer were about to make their choice. Daniel and Saris stood at the center of the chamber, not in fine clothes, not with music or celebration, but with the weight of galaxies on their shoulders. Saris lifted her hand, palm open. Daniel placed his against it. A human hand, warm and scarred. An Aelorian hand, luminous and slender. Before the council, before both species, Saris spoke. I have seen many visions, but the one I choose is this: unity. I take this human, not as my destroyer, but as my partner. Together we will shape the path forward. Daniel's voice followed, strong and clear. I choose her. Not because destiny forced me, not because of fear, but because together we can build a future no prophecy could imagine. Their hands glowed with the light of Aelorian bond rights, ancient energy that recognized truth and will. The chamber filled with that light, and the broadcast carried it to every ship, every soldier, every fearful watcher. The nightmare vision shattered. In its place, a new vision spread, of human and Aelorian united, of choice breaking the chains, of fate. Turning the tide on the edges of space, the fleets hesitated. Captains stared at the glowing broadcast, their crews whispering. The image of Daniel and Saris bound together hand in hand silenced the drums of war. Some ships lowered their weapons, others turned back. The extremists had promised destiny, but what they saw now was defiance of destiny itself. The first shot of war was never fired. Aurora Station trembled again, but this time with relief. Aftermath, when silence returned, when the fleets withdrew, when the chamber exhaled at last, Daniel and Saris lowered their hands. The light faded, but the bond remained. Counselor Thalos's face was unreadable. At last he bowed his head. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps the nightmare was only meant to bring us to this choice. Ambassador Reyes smiled faintly. Then today, humanity has proven itself. Saris turned to Daniel, her eyes soft. Do you see now? The visions were not commands. They were doors. And together, we chose which one to walk through. Daniel managed a weary smile. Then I'll keep choosing, Saris, as long as it takes. Epilogue. The human choice weeks later, Aurora Station shone once more as a place of peace. Treaties were renewed, trust rebuilt, and the story of the man from the visions spread across both species. To the Aelorians, Daniel Cross was a symbol of choice against destiny. To humans, he was proof that their species could stand shoulder to shoulder with the ancients. To Saris, he was simply the man who chose her, not because of prophecy, but because of faith. And whenever people asked Daniel about the day of the wedding, he always answered the same. It wasn't fate. It was choice. Humanity always has a choice. And in that choice, the future of two civilizations was written anew.